So nice job on that rewind. It's been a while. It feels like it's been a while since you guys had work twice last week and we had a quiz. I feel like we didn't really do much last week because it was just a quiz kind of week. So the quiz grades are posted. Everything should be up. If you guys want to start coming and doing corrections on those to do retakes, please do. Yeah. Oh, is it not on? Yeah, go ahead. Can you turn it on? Kimberly, can you reach the on button? Yeah. Is it green? There we go. All right. So can somebody remind me with number 5 how you know that that's 90 degrees? Yeah, it's got the little box. The little box tells you that it is a right angle, which means that these two lines are what? Perpendicular to each other. Okay, good. All right, so what we're going to do today is slope of a line. And we're going to talk about 2 ways to do it. We did this last year. You guys did slope last year. You probably did slope the year before. You probably did slope the year before. So we're just going to run it back for the 4th year in a row. But we're going to talk about 2 ways to find it. And we're going to focus more on parallel and perpendicular lines. So the first half of the lesson, we're just going to go through really quickly how to find the slope. There's 2 ways. You can find it from a graph or you can find it from points. If I give you a graph, what would you do to find the slope? You can count. Yeah, just count. You can just count how far. And slope measures what? What does slope measure? Rise and the run. So in other words, if you don't know what that means, rise and run, what does that mean? Rise means how much it goes up or down, and then run means good. So the top number should be how it moves vertically, and then the bottom number should be how it moves horizontally. So you start by counting either up or down, and then you move right or left. So are we going to count up or down here? Well, it depends on where you're starting from, right? Are you starting from point A or B? Does it matter? No. It doesn't actually matter. You'll get the same slope either way. So let's start from point A. If we're starting from point A, are we going to go up or down to get to point B? All right, so how many up would we go? 2. So our slope would be 2 on top. And then over is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our slope here is 2 over 5. All right? If we went from B to A, we would count which way, up or down? Which means that the 2 is actually going to be, the rise is 2, but is it positive 2 or it's negative 2? And then the run would be, it's Monday for the smartboard also. All right, and what would your run be here? It would be 5, but because you're going left, it would be negative 5. So if it's negative 2 over negative 5, then that means it's actually positive. So are these slopes any different? No. So it doesn't really matter which one you start with. It just matters that you keep track of your signs. I'm sure that will start working any second now. Okay? Why do we have to use A and B? Those are the points given. Okay. Why couldn't I start from like right here? Why couldn't I start from like right here and count? It's in between. It wouldn't be a totally different slope, but is that at a coordinate? No. Well, it is a coordinate, but are they whole numbers? No, so that's not at a whole number coordinate, which makes it really difficult to count your slope. So when they give you the points, you want to use the ones that are given. When they give you points, you want to use the ones that are given, but if they don't give you points, you want to locate points that are where? Exactly on like one of the cross, like a whole number, exactly. So you want something at a coordinate that's at a whole number because it makes it easier to find the slope. Good. Okay, what about this one? This one's undefined. What does undefined mean? It's a straight line which way? Vertically. So vertical slope is undefined. Does anybody remember or does anybody know why it's undefined? Because of slope, dude. Good. All right, but undefined. Yeah, but why? Because that's when he dies falling off the mountain. I know, but why? Mathematically, why? I mean, he doesn't die. I'm sure he lands in a soft pile of snow. All right. So why is it called undefined, though? It is rising, but it never runs. So that means, for instance, we're going here from -3 up to +5. So that would be a +8 over, but how many do you run? None. So 0. Can you have that? No, you can't have a 0 where? In the denominator. So that's why it's undefined. If you do it on your calculator and you try to divide by 0, you get an error. It says can't divide by 0. Because you can't put things into 0 groups, right? Think of division like if I have 20 apples and I divide it by 5, I'm putting it in groups of 5, right? But if I have 20 apples and I divide it into groups of 0, am I doing anything? No, that's not a thing you can do, right? So that's why it's called undefined. So it's undefined, as opposed to a horizontal line like this, which would just have a slope of what? That would be like a slope of 0. Okay, because it would be something like 0 over 8, or 0 over 7, or 0 over 6, however far you count. 0 over 8 you can do, because 0 divided by anything is just 0. All right, so horizontal is 0, vertical is undefined. All right, how do you find a slope if I don't give you a graph or if you want to use the slope formula? So this is the slope formula, which we just say y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So what does that mean? y2, y1, what are those numbers? Those are your coordinates, right? So you pick which one is coordinate 2 and which one is coordinate 1. So what's the coordinate of E? 3, 4. And then what is the coordinate of F? 6, 4. So if I plug that into the slope formula, what is y2? 4. What is y1? 4. And what is x2? 6. And what is x1? 3. So I end up with 0 over 3, which gives me 0. Could you do it the other way? Could you do 4 minus 4 and 3 minus 6? Yes. It doesn't matter as long as if you make this number 2 and this number 1, then you have to use both of those first. Madeline? Yes. If you already knew that it was 0, then you're good. Okay. So how would I find the slope here if you wanted to use the slope formula? Find your coordinates. All right. What's the coordinate of H? 2, 6. And what's the coordinate of G? 6, 2. All right. Which one is your 1 and which one is your 2? Doesn't matter. Let's make H number 1 and then make G number 2. So that means we're starting with which points? G's. We're starting with our G's. So y2 is 2 minus y1 is 6. And then x2 is 6 and x2 is, oh my gosh, x1 is 2. Thank you, Ashley. All right, what's 2 minus 6? -4. And what's 6 minus 2? +4. So it ends up being -4 over +4, which reduces to what? -1. A slope is negative if your line is going which way? Downhill. So if it's going downhill, again, if you picture this like a hill that you're skiing on, you'd be going downhill. All right. Sometimes I think it's helpful to decide that before you start because people always forget that. They like do all the subtraction and then they forget that it should be negative. So just take a quick look at it before you start and decide, okay, this should be negative. So just make sure it is when you do it. All right, go ahead and do these 6. If you guys need to come up to the board to see, they have all the points picked out for you, but it's really hard to see on your slides. So if you need to come up to the board and you want to count up here, that's fine. Just be respectful of the fact that there are like 16 of you in here. So, all right, so a couple things I noticed while you guys were doing that. One, as always, just be careful because people put the wrong stuff in the wrong spots. The other thing that's important is make sure which one goes on top? The Y's go on top. It's rise over run. So it's your vertical change over your horizontal change. And then the last thing is don't be afraid to use a calculator. I think sometimes you guys don't grab a calculator on your way and then you're just too, I don't want to say lazy, but you don't want to walk back over and get a calculator. Don't be afraid to check your work on a calculator because you can avoid making like silly, goofy mistakes with negatives when you use a calculator. All right. So if we have these two lines appear to be what? Parallel. They look like they're parallel because they look like they're never going to what? Ever going to touch. Okay, so let's find the slope of AB. So I'm going to go from point A to point B, which means I'm going up how many? 4. And then I go over how many? 1. All right, and then DC, to go from D to C, I go up 4, and then over -1. Sorry, these should have been negatives. All right, so those go over -1. So what do you notice about the slopes of these two lines? They're the same. So what rule do you think there is for parallel lines? Lines that are parallel should have the same. Yep. So they have the same slope. And it should be completely identical. If one of them is negative, the other one should be negative. Now, the only difference is, what if this was 4 over -1, but I chose to go from C to D, and I got -4 over +1. Are these the same? Yeah, they are actually the same, because really, this only has, like, you could also write this as this with the negatives on the outside. So as long as one of them is negative, it doesn't really matter which one is, okay? So they have to have the same slope, but these are actually equal to each other. Because if I reduce both of these, they just reduce to -4, okay? So those are the same. Would it be the same if both of these were negative? No, because then this one would actually be positive. Good. And that wouldn't look parallel either, right? Because if you graphed that, if one was negative and one was positive, would this line, this blue line, be going uphill or downhill? If it were positive. Uphill, so then they would actually cross each other, so they wouldn't be parallel. Okay. What about these lines? They appear like they might be perpendicular. Okay, so they appear like they might be perpendicular. So let's find the slope of ST. I'm going to do that using the slope formula. So the coordinate is -2, +2, and t is 5, -1. So what would be my slope formula here? -1 minus 2 over 5 minus -2. -1 minus 2 gives me -3. 5 minus -2 gives me 7. Okay, so this is the slope of ST. All right, and then VU, this coordinate is 3, 4. And this coordinate is -1, -4. So what's my slope formula there for VU? -4 minus 4. -1 minus 3. What's -4 minus 4? Positive, what? -4 minus 4 is -8. All right. And then -1 minus 3 is -4. So what does that give me? If I reduce that, what does that give me? 2 over -1, which is +2. Okay, so do you think those are actually perpendicular? No. Think back to last year. Perpendicular lines have what kind of slopes? Perpendicular lines have what kind of slopes? If parallel lines have identical slopes, what do you think perpendicular lines might have? Opposite slopes. So if one is positive, the other has to be negative. And then what do you think you have to do with your fraction? Not reduce it, another R word. Reciprocal. So perpendicular lines should be opposite reciprocals, which means you change the sign, and what do you do with the fraction? Flip it. So are ST and VU perpendicular? No. If they were, what would the slope of VU have to be? If this one is negative 3 over 7, VU would have to be 7 over 3, positive 7 over 3. So you'd have to flip it and change the sign. So if this one's negative, it would become positive. So then we would say that these are neither parallel nor perpendicular. They're just intersecting. All right, this is just those theorems that says in a coordinate plane, parallel lines are parallel if and only if they have the same slope. And also any two vertical lines are parallel. All right, so any two lines that are undefined are going to be parallel. In a coordinate plane, two non-vertical lines are perpendicular if and only if the product of their slopes is 1, which is a fancy way of saying opposite reciprocals. So just flip it and negate it. And vertical and horizontal lines are perpendicular. What does that mean? Because this is important. That means one of your lines is vertical. So what does that look like? Straight up and down. And the other line is perpendicular to that. The other line would be horizontal. So the slope of the vertical one is, what's the slope of a vertical line? Undefined. And the slope of a horizontal is 0. So if you ever get one undefined and one 0, then that means they have to be perpendicular. All right, so these would be perpendicular. All right, so look out for that. If you get two undefines, then that means they would be parallel. If you get two zeros, they would be parallel. Okay, so how would you do these? You're going to try these at your boards, but how would you do these? You've got two options. So we said you can find it from a graph or you can find it from the slope formula. This problem says we've got line WX and YZ, and then it has some coordinates. And you're trying to determine if they are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So how would you go about doing that?
The formula?
Probably using the formula. Why?
Because you could define it easier.
Yeah, for most of you guys, if you have the coordinates, it's easier to just do the formula. Your other option would be to do what? Draw a coordinate plane and graph it. If you want to do that, you can. Okay, once you find the slopes, which ones are you going to use to find the slope of WX? 3, 1, and 3, negative 2. So just be careful when you're doing this. So WX should be the first two, and YZ should be the second two. Okay, how do you recognize if they're parallel?
If they're both undefined.
The slopes either have to be both undefined, both 0, or just the same, identical slopes. They're perpendicular if they are opposite, so opposite reciprocals, or one is undefined and one is 0. All right, and then if they're none of those, then you would just say they are neither. Okay, all right, go ahead and try these two.